Aston Martin just built a car so extreme, it might actually be dangerous to drive. Because after only 3 races, their drivers can't even complete a full race distance safely. Not because of crashes. Because of vibration so intense, they can cause permanent nerve damage. And here's the part that shocked the entire paddock. Adrian Newey, the greatest designer in Formula 1 history, has already made a decision that changes everything. He stopped developing the car. Completely. But why would a team with Newey, Honda, and Alonso abandon development this early in the season? What exactly went so wrong inside the AMR26? And how did a 100 kilowatt engine deficit combine with a vibration problem so severe that the entire project is now in crisis? Stay with me, because once you see what's really happening inside this car, you'll understand why this might be one of the biggest technical disasters in modern Formula 1. But to understand why Newey made that decision, you have to understand just how broken this car really is. Because this isn't a normal failure. It's not one issue. It's a chain reaction. And it all starts with something you can't even see. The vibration. Because what Aston Martin discovered in Bahrain wasn't just a mechanical flaw. It was a resonance problem. The worst kind. The engine produces pulses. That's normal. Every engine does. But in the AMR26, those pulses match the natural frequency of the chassis. And when that happens, the car doesn't absorb the vibration. It amplifies it. Every cycle gets stronger. Every lap gets worse. Until the entire structure starts behaving unpredictably. And that's where everything begins to break down. Because those vibrations don't stay isolated. They spread into the battery, into the electronics, into the structural components of the car. And the effects are brutal. Battery cells deform. Energy delivery becomes unstable. Communication between systems starts to fail. And suddenly, the car is not just shaking. It's losing functionality. That's why Aston Martin completed fewer laps than any other team in testing. Even less than a brand new team entering Formula 1 for the first time. And that lack of data created a second problem. A much more dangerous one. They don't fully understand the car. Because in Formula 1, if you don't run laps, you don't learn. No race simulations. No tire degradation data. No real correlation between wind tunnel and track. Everything becomes an estimate. And that's exactly how Aston Martin arrived at the first race. Guessing. Not knowing. But here's where it becomes critical. Because the vibration didn't just damage components. It changed how the car had to be driven. Alonso couldn't push. Not because of pace. Because of pain. Because every lap, those vibrations travel through the steering wheel. Into the hands. Into the nerves. And over time, that becomes a real medical risk. Not discomfort. Damage. And when a driver has to think about that, performance is no longer the priority. Survival is. So the team did what they had to do. They reduced engine modes, lowered power, protected the battery, protected the drivers. And in doing that, they sacrificed performance completely. That's why the AMR26 looks so slow. Not just because it lacks power, but because it can't use what it has. But then came China. And that's where the illusion disappeared. Because for the first time, they had full telemetry data. And the numbers confirmed something devastating. Even without the vibration issue, the engine is still far behind. 100 kilowatts down on the electric side. That's not a gap. That's a different category. And worse, the engine is already at its limit. No hidden performance. No easy gains. What you see is what you get. So now Aston Martin is facing 2 problems at once. A mechanical issue that damages the car. And a performance deficit that can't be fixed quickly. And that combination is exactly why Newey made his decision. Because continuing development wouldn't solve either of those problems. It would only add more variables, more confusion, more uncertainty. So instead, he chose clarity. Stop, understand, reset. Because in Formula 1, sometimes the most aggressive move is knowing when to stop pushing in the wrong direction. And that's exactly what this is. Not a retreat. A recognition that the real fight is not this season. It's everything that comes after it. And this is where the situation becomes even more uncomfortable. Because once Newey decided to stop development, it sent a message, not just inside Aston Martin, across the entire paddock. This car is not ready. And more importantly, it may never be this season. Because in Formula 1, stopping development is not normal. Teams fight, they bring upgrades. They chase performance even when things go wrong. But Aston Martin did the opposite. They froze progress. And that only happens when the problem is deeper than performance. Because now every department inside the team is facing the same reality, from a different angle. The engine department sees a power unit that is already at its limit, with a massive deficit that cannot be solved quickly. The chassis engineers see a structure that amplifies vibrations instead of controlling them. The electronics team sees systems failing under stress, battery issues, communication failures, instability in energy delivery. And none of these problems exist alone. They feed each other. The vibration damages the battery. The battery limits power. The lack of power forces aggressive deployment strategies, which increases stress on the system, which brings the vibration back into focus. It's a loop, a destructive one. And that's why this project feels so difficult to fix. Because there is no single solution. Every fix creates another compromise. You reduce vibration, you lose power. You increase power, you increase instability. You protect the battery, you sacrifice performance. There is no clean path forward. Only trade-offs. And this is where tension begins to grow. Not publicly, but internally. Because when a project reaches this point, different directions start to appear. Some engineers want to keep pushing the current concept. Fix it piece by piece. Extract whatever performance is possible. But others are already thinking ahead. What if this concept is fundamentally flawed? What if no amount of development can turn this into a competitive car? And that question changes everything. Because once you start thinking like that, you're no longer developing the present. You're preparing the future. And that's exactly what Newey is doing. He's not chasing tents for the next race. He's analyzing the architecture, understanding what failed, why it failed, and how to make sure it never happens again. Because this isn't just about a bad car. It's about a failed integration, a chassis designed with one expectation, and an engine delivering something completely different. A mismatch between two systems that were supposed to work as one. And that's the real lesson here. Because in modern Formula 1, you don't build a car and then fit an engine. You build a system. Everything connected. Everything synchronized. And Aston Martin didn't achieve that. Not yet. But here's where it becomes even more critical. Because while they are stepping back, everyone else is moving forward. Ferrari is refining. Mercedes is optimizing. Red Bull, even with their own issues, is still developing. And that means the gap is not static. It's growing. Every race, every update, every lap. So Aston Martin is not just behind. They're falling further behind. But now comes the most important part of all. Because this decision, this pause in development, it's not the end of the story. It's the beginning of something much bigger. Because by stepping back now, Newey is protecting something far more valuable than this season. The future of the project. The next engine. The next car. The next opportunity to get it right. And that's why this decision is so shocking. Because it looks like a failure. But in reality, it's a reset. A controlled reset. Designed to avoid repeating the same mistake twice. But that comes with a cost. Because this season is now a sacrifice. Not officially. Not publicly. But internally. They already know. And the real question is no longer how they recover in 2026. It's how quickly they can rebuild. For the moment that actually matters. And this is where the real meaning behind Newey's decision finally becomes clear. Because this isn't just a technical reset. It's a strategic one. A very deliberate shift, away from the present, and toward something much bigger. Because inside Aston Martin, they already understand something most people don't. The AMR26 is not just underperforming. It's misaligned. Not just the engine. Not just the chassis. The entire concept. Because this car was built on an assumption. That the Honda power unit would deliver a certain level of performance, a certain level of stability, a certain behavior under load. And none of those assumptions matched reality. The engine is weaker, more aggressive in its vibrations, less efficient in energy recovery. And that mismatch? It breaks everything. Because now the chassis is reacting to forces it wasn't designed for. The aerodynamics are working on a platform that won't stay stable. The electronics are trying to manage conditions they were never calibrated for. It's not one failure. It's a system that was never fully synchronized. And that's why Newey stopped. Because you can't fix misalignment with upgrades. You fix it by redesigning the relationship between components. From the ground up. But that takes time. Months. Sometimes years. And that's why this decision points directly to one thing. 2027. Because that's where the real project begins. A fully integrated Aston Martin and Honda system. Designed together. Tested together. Aligned from the first concept. Not forced to adapt mid-season. And this is where the pressure shifts. Because now, this is no longer about results. It's about credibility. Because when a project starts like this, with this level of expectation, and this level of failure, everyone is watching what comes next. The paddock, the drivers, the engineers, and most importantly, the leadership. Because Lawrence Stroll didn't invest hundreds of millions to fight at the back. He invested to win. And right now, that vision is further away than anyone expected. But here's the final piece. Because Newey's decision, it's not just about protecting the future. It's about controlling the narrative. Because if Aston Martin kept pushing this car, kept bringing upgrades, kept chasing performance that isn't there, they risk something much worse than being slow. They risk losing direction, losing clarity, losing confidence in the entire project. But by stopping, by resetting early, they send a different message. We understand the problem. We know where it comes from. And we are already working on the solution. Even if that solution is not for today. And that's why this moment matters so much. Because it separates two types of teams. Those who react too late. And those who recognize the truth early. Even when it's uncomfortable. Even when it means sacrificing an entire season. So when you look at Aston Martin right now, don't just see a slow car. Don't just see a failed start. See a team, at the exact moment it decides, whether this is a temporary collapse, or the foundation of something much bigger. Because the AMR26 might be a disaster. But the decision Newey just made will define whether it stays that way, or becomes the reason Aston Martin finally gets it right.